If you're into epic rise and fall stories, the kind that define the very arc of history, you need to know Rome. But who has time for a 1,000-year saga filled with dense textbooks and complex family trees? If you're short on time, I got you. We're going to break down how a small city-state on the Tiber River conquered the known world, from its mythical founding to the dawn of its empire. From timeline to empire, this is the story of how Rome took over the world, fast. So fasten your toga. Rome's story officially kicks off with a legend, dated to 753 BCE. It's a tale of twin brothers, Romulus and Remus, demigods cast out to die but miraculously saved and suckled by a she-wolf. As adults, they returned to found a city, but a bitter rivalry over who would rule ended in bloodshed, with Romulus killing his brother and naming the city after himself, Rome. It's a brutal, dramatic founding myth, and it sets a powerful precedent for a city that would be defined by ambition and civil strife. But here, legend meets reality. Archaeologists tell a slightly different story. Instead of a single dramatic founding, early Rome was more likely a collection of small Latin and Sabine villages, scattered across 7 hills. These communities gradually merged, influenced by the sophisticated Etruscans to the north and Greek colonies to the south. For over 2 centuries, Rome was ruled by kings, some of whom were Etruscan. They laid the groundwork, building the first forum and major temples, but the Romans developed a deep-seated hatred for monarchy. In 509 BCE, they overthrew their last king, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, and declared they would never again be ruled by one man. The Republic was born. Its motto was, Senatus Populusque Romanus, the Senate and the people of Rome. Power was now meant to be shared. At the top were 2 consuls, elected annually, who held executive power. This dual leadership was a brilliant innovation designed to prevent any one person from becoming a tyrant. The real center of power, however, was the Senate, an advisory council of about 300 men from the patrician class, the wealthy, landowning aristocracy. They controlled the state's finances and foreign policy. But what about the people in SPQR? The vast majority of citizens were plebeians, common farmers, artisans, and merchants. Initially, they had little power, which led to centuries of social struggle known as the conflict of the orders. The plebeians used their leverage, primarily by threatening to secede and form their own city, to win crucial rights. They gained their own representatives, the tribunes of the plebs, who could veto acts of the Senate, and eventually forced the laws to be written down for all to see in the 12 tables. This constant internal negotiation created a resilient, adaptable political system, one that was now ready to look beyond its own walls. And that brings us to the engine of Roman expansion, the legion. Rome's early army was a citizen militia, but it evolved into the most formidable fighting force in the ancient world. Highly disciplined, brilliantly engineered, and relentlessly drilled, the legions were the sharp end of Roman policy. But Rome's genius wasn't just in winning battles, it was in what came after. Instead of simply crushing their defeated Italian neighbors, they employed a sophisticated system of control. Some conquered peoples were granted full Roman citizenship, others received partial rights, and most were bound to Rome as allies, required to provide soldiers for the Roman army. This created a snowball effect. Every victory gave Rome more manpower for the next war. To control this growing territory, they built their legendary roads. All roads lead to Rome wasn't just a saying, it was a strategic reality. These stone-paved highways allowed legions to move with unprecedented speed to quell rebellions or defend frontiers. By 264 BCE, Rome had consolidated its control over the entire Italian peninsula. They were a regional powerhouse, but they were about to collide with an empire that would test them to their limits. Across the Mediterranean in modern-day Tunisia lay Carthage, a vast and wealthy maritime empire. The clash between the land-based power of Rome and the sea-based power of Carthage was inevitable. The result was a series of 3 conflicts known as the Punic Wars, a century-long struggle for dominance of the Western Mediterranean. The First Punic War was fought over Sicily, forcing the Romans, a land power, to build a navy from scratch. They did, and they won, seizing Sicily, Sardinia, and Corsica. But this was just the opening act. The Second Punic War gave us one of history's greatest military commanders, Hannibal Barca. In 218 BCE, he launched one of the most audacious military maneuvers in history, marching his army, complete with war elephants, out of Spain, across the Pyrenees, and over the treacherous Alps, into Italy. He inflicted a series of devastating defeats on the Romans, culminating in the Battle of Cannae, where he annihilated a Roman army nearly twice the size of his own. For over a decade, Hannibal rampaged through Italy, but he could never take the city of Rome itself. The Roman system of alliances held firm. Rome produced its own brilliant general Scipio Africanus, who took the fight to Carthage's home turf in North Africa. This forced Hannibal to abandon Italy to defend his city. At the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE, Scipio finally defeated Hannibal, ending the war. Carthage was stripped of its empire and forced to pay a massive indemnity. A generation later, in the Third Punic War, a vengeful Rome utterly destroyed the city of Carthage, cementing its status as the undisputed master of the Mediterranean. But this rapid expansion came at a cost. The Republic was drowning in its own success. Unimaginable wealth and a flood of enslaved people poured into Italy, creating vast, slave-run plantations called latifundia. These estates drove small citizen farmers, the traditional backbone of the army, off their land and into the city, creating a volatile, landless urban mob. The old system was breaking. The first to try and fix it were the Gracchi brothers, Tiberius and Gaius. As tribunes, they proposed land reforms to redistribute wealth back to the poor. For their efforts, both were murdered by mobs of senators and their supporters. Their deaths opened the door to a new, more dangerous era of Roman politics, where violence became a tool. The next major figure was Gaius Marius, a brilliant general who reformed the army. He abolished the property requirement for service, allowing the landless poor to enlist. This solved the manpower crisis, but it had a fatal side effect. These new soldiers were loyal not to the Senate and people of Rome, but to the general who paid them and promised them land upon retirement. The army had become politicized. This set the stage for a series of bloody civil wars, first between Marius and his rival Sulla, who marched his own army on Rome, a shocking, unprecedented act. The Republic was tearing itself apart, and into this chaos stepped the most famous Roman of all, Gaius Julius Caesar. A brilliant politician, writer, and military genius, Caesar used a command in Gaul, modern-day France, to conquer a vast territory, making him fabulously wealthy, and giving him a battle-hardened, fanatically loyal army. His rivals in the Senate, led by Pompey the Great, grew fearful of his power and ordered him to disband his army and return to Rome. In 49 BCE, Caesar made a fateful decision. He led his legion across the Rubicon River, the northern boundary of Italy. This was an act of treason and an open declaration of war. The phrase "crossing the Rubicon" has meant passing a point of no return ever since. He crushed Pompey and his other rivals in a swift civil war, and by 45 BCE, he was the undisputed master of Rome. He was made dictator for life, and it seemed the Republic was dead, replaced by a new monarchy in all but name. But the spirit of the Republic wasn't quite extinguished. On the Ides of March, 44 BCE, a group of senators, calling themselves the Liberators, assassinated Caesar on the floor of the Senate, hoping to restore the old order. They failed. Caesar's murder didn't save the Republic. It plunged it into another 13 years of brutal civil war. Out of the wreckage emerged Caesar's grandnephew and adopted heir, Octavian. A cold, calculating, and politically brilliant young man, he systematically defeated all his rivals, including Caesar's assassins and his former ally, Mark Antony, along with his famous lover, the Egyptian queen Cleopatra. By 31 BCE, Octavian stood alone, the sole ruler of the Roman world. But he had learned from Caesar's mistake. He knew Romans would never accept an overt king. So, in 27 BCE, in a masterful piece of political theater, he went before the Senate and announced he was restoring the Republic. In gratitude, the Senate gave him vast powers and a new name, Augustus, the revered one. He called himself princeps, or first citizen, not king or dictator, but it was a fiction. Augustus retained command of the key provinces and their armies, controlled the treasury, and held ultimate authority. He had created a new system, the empire. Centralized power was now a reality, hidden behind the facade of the old republic. He professionalized the bureaucracy, secured the frontiers, and launched a massive building program, famously boasting that he found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. Augustus's reign ushered in an unprecedented era of stability and prosperity that would last for over 200 years. The Pax Romana, the Roman peace. With the civil wars over, Trade flourished across the empire, from Britain to Egypt, from Spain to Syria. This peace was guaranteed by two key engines of Roman power that had been perfected over centuries: the military and infrastructure. The legions were no longer personal armies but a permanent, professional border patrol, and the infrastructure was the glue that held it all together. The roads, now stretching over 400,000 kilometers, moved not just soldiers but goods, ideas, and administrators. Aqueducts, marvels of engineering, brought fresh water to cities, allowing them to grow to sizes not seen again until the Industrial Revolution. And, underpinning it all, was Roman law, a sophisticated legal framework that provided a predictable, unified system for resolving disputes across a diverse empire of millions. For centuries, this system worked, but no empire lasts forever. Centuries later, a combination of factors began to take their toll. Internal decay, including political instability, economic crises, and plagues, weakened the empire from within. At the same time, external pressures from barbarian tribes along the Rhine and Danube frontiers intensified. The empire grew too large and complex to be governed by one man from one city. It eventually split into a western and an eastern half. The Western Roman Empire finally fell in 476 CE, but the Eastern, or Byzantine Empire, would survive for another 1,000 years. The physical empire may have crumbled, but Roman ideas, in law, language, architecture, engineering, and government, survive everywhere. They are the foundation of Western civilization, from a mythical murder to a republic and from civil war to an empire that shaped the world. Rome's rise was a breathtaking story of ambition, innovation, and brutal efficiency. If you love this fast tour through one of history's greatest empires, show your support and subscribe to Timelines and like the video for more deep dives into the moments that made us.